All right, that's great. Thank you very much, Scott. So just to introduce myself, my name is Warren, and I'm from a charity called Fast Forward. You can see that up in the top left-hand corner there. Fast Forward, some of you may have worked with us before, but we're a national charity based in Scotland that focus on anything to do with the health and well-being of young people. We cover all 32 local authorities in Scotland with various different projects. And traditionally, we focused on things like substance use education, alcohol education, and tobacco education. But more recently, we've focused on more modern, perhaps more behavioural things that affect the health and well-being of young people. A couple of years ago, we received funding for a project from Gamble Aware. You can see their logo up in the top right-hand corner. And Gamble Aware organisation that focus on reducing the harm that can come from gambling. And they launched this project in Scotland as the first of its kind. And our aim is to reduce gambling harm and provide all young people in Scotland with gambling education and prevention resources. Now, where gaming comes into this is that we've seen with emerging technologies how there's elements within games that look quite similar to gambling and might pose a risk to young people as well. So hopefully we'll cover that as we go. But as a couple of things, if anyone uses Twitter, you can see our Twitter handles down at the bottom there. We've got Gambling Education Hub Twitter, which is @GamblingEducHub, which is @GamblingEduC Hub, and then my Twitter is @WarrenHughesFF. And I believe the Education Scotland Digital Learning Team, their Twitter is @DigiLearnScot or DigiLearnScot.
Thanks.
DigiLearnScot, brilliant. So use that hashtag and their handle as well, and it'd be great to hear and continue the conversation on Twitter. All right, Scott. So just to show some of the work that we've been doing from the Gambling Education Hub, we've been going for about 2 years, and you can find out much more about us on our website. It's accessed through the Fast Forward homepage, which is fastforward.org.uk. And on this, you can see, first of all, what we do, what we've been doing, including some of our training. We focus on training practitioners and teachers in a variety of different sectors. I personally do a lot of work in schools, in colleges and universities, but we also work with youth workers, youth employability services and family services as well. We run the Scottish Gambling Education Network, which is a network for practitioners and teachers based in Scotland to share their ideas and news that's coming up about gambling and how, again, it affects young people in Scotland. And the last thing to mention, which we'll touch on throughout the session today, but I recommend you checking out after the webinar, is the Gambling Education Toolkit. It's a free resource for anyone that works directly with young people, and it has loads of information about gambling and gaming, as well as activities, pre-written lesson plans, and links to the Curriculum of Excellence, so you can just pull them straight out and use them in the classroom if you like. We also work directly with schools and teachers to incorporate those into their lessons. To go through what we're going to be speaking about today, it's quite simple. The first part, I'll speak about gambling and how that relates to young people. A lot of people think that gambling is an activity that is only for older people, but with advances in technology, it might be more appealing to young people, and we'll discuss that as we go. Then we'll move on to speak more about gaming, and more specifically, the convergence of gaming and gambling. And we'll follow up with some support and advice available so that you can go away, do a bit of further reading and find out a bit more about what we've been discussing today. Scott, if you can pop onto the next slide there. There we go, super. So to give gambling a definition, we like to say that gambling is taking part in a game during which you risk money or something of monetary value in order to win more money or a prize. And when you apply that definition, it could be much more than you originally think. A lot of people think of the bookies or the casino or the bingo as their go-to areas of gambling, but it's a lot more than that. You can factor in common forms of gambling such as the lottery or scratch cards, which are both, at the moment, they're legal for 16-year-olds to pay for. But then there's also things like raffle tickets and tombolas. And when we bring in that type of gambling, it's important to recognise that not all types of gambling are equal in the risk they have. Some forms of gambling are riskier than others, and some are perhaps safer. But all elements of gambling do pose an element of risk, and we'll go in to speak about how that affects young people as we go. the gambling industry is huge in the UK. And you can see here in the last 10 years how much money and how they've been increasing the amount of money and revenue they've been making. From 2009, when they made £8 billion, right up to last year, 2019, when they posted a revenue of over £14 billion. And their business model is really simple. They use something called the house edge. And it may seem obvious to explain, but the house edge is a mathematical advantage that the gambling industry give themselves over the player. It can be as small as perhaps 51% in some gambling games, right up to extremely unlikely that the player would win. And the reason why that makes so much money is something called the law of averages. It might be quite likely that you would go in to, say, a casino and win straight away. However, the more you play a certain game, the more likely that the results will reflect the true odds of that game. So when it comes to gambling and you win early on, you might get a feeling you want to recreate that. But the more you play, the more likely you are to lose. However, often people can develop problematic behaviours, thinking that they will recreate when they won early on. And that's why it can be incredibly dangerous. And it's really important to emphasise when we speak about gambling that the majority of people that gamble do so safely. There'll be some people on this webinar that gamble themselves, but some do develop an addiction and problematic behaviour, and that can cause harm both to themselves and others. The gambling industry in recent years has changed significantly, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. You can see here how the ease has changed over time. Before, you had to go to the bookies or the casino and you had to hand over cash to gamble. And then with the introduction of the internet, it allowed people to gamble from their own homes, perhaps setting up direct debits to gamble. And then with the introduction of smart technology, it allowed people to gamble remotely, not just from their own homes, but absolutely anywhere at any time. And that continuity of play really does add to the risk that gambling can have. It also makes gambling more appealing to different demographics. It's not so much just a social event for perhaps older people. Now, because a lot of young people especially spend so much time on their smart devices, now that they're gambling on that as well, it allows them just to factor gambling in to the rest of their lives. Thanks, Scott. So then, as we see more and more online gambling and how prevalent it now is, why might online gambling increase that risk of harm as a specific type? I've got some reasons up there and I'll just talk through them. The availability, how accessible it is. You might just be, and convenience as well. It might be on your phone by your side of your bed and you might wake up and it's just easy to do. Electronic payment. You're not handing over cash, you don't see the money. It's just a number in the corner and you lose an idea about how much that might be worth. The anonymity of participation. People don't know who you are, people don't know how old you are. So you can hide who you really are and it's easy to do that. It's also easy to hide if you've been under the influence. You might have drank a lot or taken drugs and there's no one there to stop you saying, oh, I think you've had too much. The continuation of play without breaks is really important to highlight. The idea that you can keep on going without anyone stopping you for 24 hours or until you've got nothing left. There's higher payout rates with online gambling. You can, once you've played and if you've won, you can put that straight back in and gamble again with that high frequency. And it's easy to isolate yourself. Rather than getting up and going, if you're gambling, you can just stay and it can become incredibly isolated. And one thing I hear when I speak about gambling, and I do direct work with young people, is that gambling is a risk just like any others. Crossing the road's a risk. So what makes gambling different? Well, a lot of mechanisms within gambling, through some of the research, it is incredibly addictive. And if we think about how young people's brains are still developing right up until they're around 25 years old, this is really important to recognise that gambling is an addictive activity and can be incredibly harmful. Some of these ideas here to explain gambling games with multiple opportunities to play can be more addictive, allowing people to bet on multiple things. If you imagine in football or on slot machines, with football these days you can gamble not just on the result of the game, you can gamble on corners, throw-ins, the minute that the goal might be scored in. Slot machines, it's not just one line that you're playing or 4 lines. You can play up to 20 or 30 lines, and those multiple opportunities can be addictive. Elements with variable stake size can be more addictive. For example, the lottery tickets, that's £2 a lottery ticket. You can't pay £10 for the same lottery ticket and hope to multiply your prize by 5. That doesn't work that way. But there are lots of elements within different forms of gambling that you can vary your stake size in the hope to win more. And that can be quite addictive to someone that gambles. High event frequency and continuity of play, those that we've discussed in terms of online play, when you can keep on playing for 24 hours, or the higher payout rates are also addictive. You see those in slot machines or online casino games a lot. And the last two, near misses or losses disguised as wins, you see it in lots of different forms of gambling. And actually, to touch on those, I'll use an analogy looking at scratch cards. I'm sure lots of people on the call, well, they know what a scratch card is, if not have bought one themselves. And how often, when you do that, have you hopefully get 3 treasure chests to win £1 million, and you scratch off 2 treasure chests, and you go, yes, I'm going to win £1 million. But the third one is a pot of gold, and you haven't won. But what that feels like is that you've almost won. You're one away. So maybe I'll just do another one. Or if you keep on doing that, it feels like you keep on almost winning or nearly missing, even though you are losing. And then losses disguised as wins. When, let's say, another scratch card, you go in and you buy a £5 scratch card, but in that scratch card you win £3. You're delighted. I'm going to go to the shop, cash in that £3, hold up my winnings. I'm really happy. However, you've lost £2. But what that feels like to a lot of people is that you've won. And if someone keeps on doing that, then it's really dangerous that they keep on thinking that they're winning, however they keep on losing. And especially if we factor in young people, how dangerous that can be to their psychology as well. Now, to highlight some of these just within gambling, they're also within games as well, and we'll speak about that later on. We've mentioned the word harm quite a lot when it comes to gambling, and how gambling harms and what increases the risk of harm. And when we speak about harm, what the gambling addiction, what people call it, is known as gambling disorder. And that's a mental health problem involving persistent and recurrent problematic gambling behaviour that causes harm both to the gambler and those around them. And it's really important to recognise. It's been recognised in the World Health Organization and in the Diagnostic Statistics Manual as an official mental health disorder. But it's not as easy as black or white, as you're addicted or you're not. And a lot of young people I work with think that. And they say, okay, well, you're either addicted and these people have an addiction or they don't. It's much more of a scale. And a lot of people sit in that middle kind of at-risk behaviour. We know that the majority of people that gamble do so safely, are in that section. However, because of some of the addictive characteristics, people can move up that scale and it can be quite harmful. Now, looking at different behaviours related to that, safer gambling behaviour might be looking at someone gambling only what they can afford to lose. Their motivations might be just doing it for fun or for social purposes. Or their frequency, it might be infrequent, just every so often, or for a special event. However, if you move up to at-risk gambling or gambling disorder, people are starting to gamble more than they can afford to lose, or doing it for different motivations, doing it as a way to make money. They think that gambling, despite the house edge, is doing that. They might be chasing their losses. If they've lost some money and they think that recouping that money, the way to do that is by gambling more. Perhaps they might be stealing money to gamble or borrowing money to gamble, or they can't walk away from it. They can't stop that compulsion to keep on going, even if they try to stop, if they struggle to. These are all signs and symptoms of gambling disorder. So why does it relate to young people? We've spoken about here, you're all teachers and working directly with young people. But we know from research that gambling early on has been linked to gambling disorder later in life. And young people are being socially conditioned to view gambling as a legitimate social activity freely available to them. So the question is then, do young people gamble? And from some research that's been published in the last couple of years, we know that they do. We know that more than a third of 11 to 16s have gambled in the past 12 months. Over half of 17-year-olds have gambled in the past 12 months, despite the most forms of gambling, you have to be older than 18. And 2/3 of 20-year-olds have gambled in the past 12 months. And it's really important to highlight that between 17-year-olds and 20-year-olds, the most common or the most increased form of gambling was online gambling. And here I put up a slide, looks at in context with other activities. People say, okay, well, gambling, I see you're speaking about that, but we need to focus on alcohol and substance use education, tobacco education, which we don't want you to stop doing. That's really important. However, gambling is often neglected when it comes to risk-taking behaviours, and where we want it to be included as level. And you can see here that although alcohol is the most common activity among 11 to 16s in the last week, gambling is the second most common, with around 1 in 10 11 to 16-year-olds gambling in the past 7 days, more than those that smoked an e-cigarette, smoked tobacco, or taken illegal drugs. Yet, often parents make rules on everything you can see on the right. Rarely do parents make rules on gambling. What we speak in education, schools, we rarely touch on gambling compared to the others as well, and how it's perceived in the media, and loads of different factors, as to we have so much focus on the others, whereas gambling is often neglected in terms of the education for young people. So we know that young people gamble, but why do they gamble? And it's really important to highlight looking at why young people, their motivations. And you can see here the report that looked into 11 to 16-year-olds into finding out that they do gamble. It looked at why they gamble. And why that's important is the engagement. I often do activities with young people, getting them to guess the motivations why other young people might gamble. Because if they don't gamble at the moment, then they'll switch off. I don't gamble, this isn't relevant to me, I don't care what you're saying. So understanding motivations and explaining that to young people is a really good way to increase that engagement. So some common motivations why young people gamble: because it's fun would be the top reason, to try and win money, because it gives me something to do, that boredom element, or the thrill, to get a buzz because it's exciting. Sometimes they want to take risks, or because they think they're likely to win money, because it's cool. That could be down to the marketing or their peers, because it's something their parents do, that family influence from that. Because I will win more than I will lose, and because it helps me when I feel depressed, nervous, or in a bad mood. And those last two for me are ones just to highlight. The idea, the certainty, because I will win more than I will lose. What that highlights is a misunderstanding about how gambling actually works, or naivety, and really emphasizes the importance of gambling education. And because it helps me when I feel depressed, nervous, or in a bad mood. Often I do sessions with adults, and I get them to guess their motivations around young people, why young people gamble, and they never get this one. They don't realize that young people might gamble to escape from those feelings. But when I do sessions with young people, they understand that. They think that gambling is a legitimate way to feel better, to help when they're feeling in a bad mood. And the last one, I think it's covered up there, but it's because it's something my friends do or my peers do as well. So you can see that peer influence as well. Thanks very much, Scott. So as with anything, Fast Forward and everything that we do is a harm reduction charity. And we don't go and wag the finger and say, don't do these things, don't gamble, don't take drugs. What we do is we respect that some people are going to do these things and provide information so that people can make the right decisions, healthy decisions, but ultimately do so and keep safe. So here are some tips if people are deciding to gamble, whether it's young people or adults, some ways to keep safe in doing so. So avoiding thinking of gambling as a way to make money. It's really important that gambling should only be viewed as entertainment, as an element of fun. If they are going to do it, if their motivations turn financial, then it can be harmful. Only gambling with money you can afford to lose, with expendable income, making sure that you've spent money on the most important priorities before spending money on gambling. Setting limits with both your time and with money, and never chasing losses. Once you've lost, consider that money gone. You've spent that money already. Don't try and win it back by gambling more. Avoid gambling when you're feeling emotional, whether that's sad or angry, and balancing gambling with other activities, as well as taking frequent breaks just to reconsider how you're gambling and what you've spent. And avoid using drink or drugs when gambling as well, just to help you, because that can really inhibit your decision-making process. At this point, before we move on to gaming, Eva, have there been any questions in the chat box?
It's very quiet, Warren. No questions so far, but we could pause for a minute or two to give people a chance to put their questions forward. There's just a wee drop of us in this webinar today, just a cosy 18, so feel free, pop your questions in, and I can read them out to Lauren.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Eva. Yeah, I'll leave it just for a minute or so, just to allow people to type in any questions that they do have. But a lot of the information that I've covered, as well as being on these slides, is in the Gambling Education Toolkit if you want to revisit those as well. But please, as we go with the gaming, but also with the gambling information, pop any questions to Eva in the chat box and we'll try and cover those.
Great. No questions so far, but just a couple of nice comments that people are really enjoying this and it's really interesting and useful. So thank you, Lauren.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your feedback, guys.
I think we could probably move on now, Lauren. I don't see anybody typing at the moment, but if anything pops up, I'll be sure to let you know.
Eva, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to discuss gaming. And when it comes to gaming, it's an incredibly broad topic. It's simply defined as a game that you can play on a digital device, whether that's your phone, your tablet, perhaps your computer, or your console, is it's Xbox or PlayStation. And gaming can be used in loads of positive ways. It can be used really effectively in education or socially to help people connect with others. But there are lots of grey areas around gaming as well, as it's a new emerging industry. There's questions around things like gaming disorder or screen time. What we do know is that just like gambling and with any risk-taking behaviour, that anything done in excess can be harmful. So although with gaming there are positives that can be taken from it, if done excessively, it can be harmful. And what we're going to be specifically speaking about today is with the emerging technologies within gaming, how some of them are more similar to gambling as well. And we looked at some prevalence when it came to gambling and young people, and we looked at and we saw that there's around 1 in 10 that have gambled in the past week on 11 to 16-year-olds. But when it comes to gaming, we know that the overwhelming majority of children play games in the UK. That's 93%. Of children in the UK game regularly. And that's why it's so important to discuss these things and make adults or anyone that works directly with young people aware of some of the risks and some of the mechanisms within games that these young people are exposed to. So why are we discussing gaming and gambling together? We're the Gambling Education Hub. Why are they discussing gaming? And there are some similarities that we've received from the NCPG in America, but looking at why the similarities, whether they're structural, psychological, or behavioural, the similarities between gaming and gambling. The first one that we have is speed and availability. We discussed about how because of ease of time, over time, how gambling has become easier. Well, it's the same with gaming. You can play it on any device that you have. You can play at any time. That idea of the continuity of play. The socialization and FOMO. For those that don't know what FOMO is, it's the fear of missing out. And you can see that in both gaming and gambling. I know from my perspective, when I went through university, how a lot of people loved to gamble. And I played for the football team at the time. And if I didn't go and gamble with everybody else, I would be missing out. And that was kind of that social approval that I wanted to do. Whereas you know that 93% of young people game regularly. And so that socialization and that fear of missing out is just as prevalent in gaming as it is in gambling. The idea of dopamine and rewards. Dopamine is a hormone that gets released in the brain that increases your positive mood. And you see that in gambling with the idea of uncertain rewards. You see it with gaming as well, in loads of different elements where you receive rewards and it really stimulates your brain. The idea of identity and accomplishment. In games, you become your character, and your character is your new identity. And a lot of people might use identity and accomplishment within gambling as well. It becomes your identity. It becomes who you are in terms of what you do, and you see that in lots in both activities. Both gaming and gambling, you would have an investment in progress. Lots of within games, you see leveling up and you want to try and achieve the top level, and it'll take you time to get there, and you might not be having as much fun as you did at the start when you get towards the end, but you spent so much time in doing so, you might as well keep going. And you see that in elements of gambling as well. People that gamble more, they've spent so much money and they've spent so much time doing it. Perhaps people playing the lottery have been playing it for so long, they kind of think, oh, I've spent so much money, I might as well keep playing. If the week I don't play, my numbers will definitely come up. And you hear those phrases a lot, even though the odds, they're never going to win. Yet people invest in progress, both in games and gambling. And then the last one looks at escapism and dissociation. And actually, when it comes to gaming, escapism isn't always a bad thing, especially in the situation we're in where everybody's locked inside. People might use gaming as a way to escape, just to explore a virtual world. And it can be really positive in terms of that exploration. Where it can become dangerous is when people start to dissociate from the real world, when they start to prioritize their time in the digital world over the time in the real world. And you can see that within gambling as well, where the idea of where people escaping and using gamble as a way to cope with negative feelings, which can be incredibly dangerous. I'm going to go through a brief history about the video game industry and how they've made their money, especially over the last 20 or 30 years. It's not as easy as the gambling industry giving themselves a house edge, so they're guaranteed to make money. With the video game industry, they usually make hard copies of their games. But these games lose value incredibly quickly. Sometimes video games get released and they cost £70 or £80 to buy, but within months, they might be half that or less. So the video games industry really need to make different ways to make money. And here are some ideas about how they've done that over the last 30 years. In the 1990s, you saw introduction of expansion packs. So you've already purchased the game, but to get a little bit extra within that game, you might buy an expansion pack to expand on what you've done. There are some games that introduced yearly releases, some perhaps football games. Since 1993, there's one popular football game that's been released every single year since then. Some games included in the 1990s subscriptions, where you bought the game, but to keep on playing, you needed to pay, such as £10 a month. And by accumulating that makes the industries or the games companies money on an ongoing level. And then when you hit the millennium, we saw the introduction of more downloadable content. That's what DLC stands for, downloadable content. And that's quite similar to expansions packs, but you might be downloading an extra map or an extra quest within a game. There's also options such as microtransactions, and we'll speak a bit more about microtransactions in a second, but what they are just small financial transactions within a game. They're very prevalent in mobile games that I'm sure a lot of you have played, but they're also prevalent within video games, as in looking at Xbox and PlayStation games and on the computers as well. We've got season passes up there. Season passes are a little bit like kind of DLC and expansion packs, but what they do is you pay for, say, a month's pass, and that gives you access to all of the downloadable content within that time period. But then once that season is finished, you lose that, and so you need to buy a season pass again. And loot boxes, the last one to discuss. They're a type of microtransaction. However, the reward that you're going to get, what you're purchasing, you don't know. It's uncertain. And there, you begin asking questions how that might be similar to gambling. And we'll speak about loot boxes in a second as well. But you can see here, the industry itself is worth about £4 billion in the UK, which is more than double its value in 2007. And actually, that's more than the video and the music industries combined in the UK. So what are microtransactions? As I mentioned, they are small financial transactions conducted in-game. They can be from as little as 79p, and they can go up to over £100, these microtransactions. And they can be for lots of different things. Some things that you can buy with a microtransaction, they're called pay to win. So what they do is they enhance your profile. They enhance the way you can play the game, whether it's a better football player or a better gun, something that allows you to be more effective in the game that you're playing. They may be purely cosmetic, just something that can change the appearance, but not change how you play the game at all. So there's different types of microtransactions. Some of these might give you a time advantage. There's a phrase used among gamers called the grind, And what the grind is the time it takes for you to progress through that game. And often games now have an extremely long grind. It takes you a long time to progress, but some microtransactions allow you to do that quicker. And people really want to get to the next level as fast as possible. They want to be the first ones there. So you can see the appeal of microtransactions. Some factor in reward removal. The game might give you a reward and say you've got this for a week, and then they take it away. And nobody likes to be taking away something they already have, but the only way to get it back is by paying for it through a microtransaction. There might be inducements to spend more. Once you've bought one thing, we know that the people that spend even a little bit are more likely to spend more money. So as soon as you buy something, you'll get an advert saying, oh, why not buy another one for cheaper? There's also ideas around loss aversion and fun pain. Loss aversion being if you are close to losing, then what they'll do is they'll give you, say, oh, hold on, you might lose. Here's some, buy this, and that'll keep you afloat, keep you going. Or fun pain, the idea that you've ran out of lives. But hold on, you can pay to keep on going right now. These ideas are both forms of microtransactions. And the last thing to mention is that, and we'll go on to speak out, we've got the screen on there, is the idea of in-game currency, and how in-game currency is a step in between often paying for what you're getting. And they use in-game currency as a kind of way to cover up, perhaps, how much the value or the true value of what it is that you're paying for. I've got a screen grab there of a popular game at the moment, and you can see some of the in-game currency that you're paying for. They're called V-Bucks, and you can see for £8 you can buy 1,000 V-Bucks, right up to for £80 you can buy 13,500 V-Bucks. And now I'm quite good at maths. I work in gambling education. However, I have no idea what the exchange rate is, what the V-Buck is to the pound. And if I can't do that, imagine young people playing these games, how they can work out what it is that they're spending money on. We've also got on the right-hand side, limited time offers. That idea about, hold on, look, you can see the red strike pack here. So for £4 plus 600 V-Bucks, then you can purchase this thing, but only for a set amount of time, and then you'll be the only person with this outfit. Now this is purely cosmetic, but it makes them the idea about they're the only people that look this way in the game. So let's take an example that you spend £20 on 2,800 V-Bucks. And if Scott, if you go to the next slide. So we've purchased our 2,800 V-Bucks and for £20, and this is our shopping window screen. Now, I quite like the look of that silver fang, the harvesting tool, which is 800 V-Bucks. So I'm going to get that. I've got 2,800 V-Bucks, so I'll spend that. But now I have no idea how much that in real terms money is actually worth. And this extra step where you factor in the V-Bucks and you factor in the in-game currency that you purchase before you buy what it is you actually buy, it helps, well, what it does is it takes away that grip on what actual value these things have. So the only way you can see is how much you're spending on V-Bucks. You don't know how much individual things that you're buying are actually worth in terms of monetary value. And to touch on loot boxes, what loot boxes are exactly the same in terms of a microtransaction, something you're paying for within a game. But the difference is that the reward is uncertain. In that last example, I was buying that harvesting tool for 800 V-Bucks. However, with a loot box, I would be buying perhaps a box or a pack of cards or a key to a crate or a treasure chest. And the idea is that I have no idea what I'm going to get. And that is when we start to see the mechanics of gambling within these games as well. And what we've seen lots of studies look into how that might affect young people. And I'll look at some of the reports in a little bit. I'm going to use an example of a different game that includes loot boxes. It's a game here. It's a popular football game. And you can see once people or young people, whoever they are paying for those coins that you can see on the screen, whether it's 500 green coins up to 1,000 green coins, and then they can purchase these packs. We've got a rare gold pack, a La Liga premium players pack, a prime gold players pack, or a rare players pack. One of them has Cristiano Ronaldo, which is a very famous football player, and it'd be great to get him in the pack. But the odds of getting the best players are incredibly unlikely. But the idea that with these, you have no idea what you're going to get. And if we bring in and remember some of the addictive characteristics that we saw about gambling, things like uncertain rewards are incredibly addictive. And the idea where your brain is more stimulated when a reward is uncertain, it becomes more dangerous. If I was to give, say, Scott £5, and I said, Scott, here's £5, he'd be delighted, his brain would be stimulated. But if I said, Scott, I've got a coin here, I'm going to flip my coin, and if it's heads, then I'm going to give you £5. Then as I flip that coin, Scott's brain is more stimulated than if I was just to give him £5. We know that brain's more stimulated when a reward is uncertain, and that's why it can be harmful to young people. So not only that, once you click on that pack and open it, Scott's going to go to the next slide and you'll see what happens. You don't just open a pack like a pack of cards and just pick it out and see what you've got. There's a build-up, there's fireworks, there's drum rolls, and you can see there that we've got fireworks, confetti, clouds of smoke, your player walks out and waves at you. All of these ideas just really help stimulate the brain in terms of opening these uncertain reward, these loot boxes. And when we think about these loot boxes, at the moment, it sounds like they're quite gambling-like. However, they are not recognised as gambling within UK law. Mainly it's because there's no way to monetize what you're buying. So at the moment, you pay for something within a game, and there's no way to officially monetize that. And to have something of monetary value is what you need to make it, by law, a form of gambling. However, they have been in the news a lot, and the government are going to have a look at regulating them as well. Where it becomes quite difficult for young people especially is the introduction of YouTube and Twitch, where actually lots of people pay for loot boxes and open them on these streaming services. And it's a very popular thing for young people to go on YouTube and watch. So looking at some of the research and reports in recent times, just in the last couple of years that have looked into loot boxes, we know that 40% of young gamers in the UK have paid to open a loot box. And actually, we factor in that 93% of young people are regularly gaming. 40% is a lot of young people. Among the most played desktop games, the presence of loot boxes has increased from about 4% to 71% over the past 9 years. Loot boxes are in 63% of the top games in the Google Play Store, and about half of the games with loot boxes are rated suitable for children aged 7+, and 93% of games with loot boxes are available for children that are 12+. And some specifically looking at the behaviours related to gaming and gambling. Research has found loot boxes are psychologically akin to gambling in terms of what happens in the brain. Young people, in terms of a prevalent study looking at young people's opinions, young people consider loot boxes to be a highly addictive form of gambling. And recent research has found links between the amount young people spend on loot boxes and the severity of their gambling behaviour. But it's not just microtransactions and loot boxes that are our issue and why the Gambling Education Hub are speaking about gambling. There's also the introduction of esports. And for those that don't know, esports are professional people playing video games, or young people watching professional gamers play each other. And you can see them in any games, perhaps it's a shooting game or a football game, but it's watching people play the game professionally against each other. And with the growth in esports, it's millions of people watch these worldwide. And with the growth, you start factoring in gambling on esports as well. I've got a screen here, you can see it's an esports new customer offer where you get £30 of free bets. There's also the marketing of different gambling games. So going back to gambling and actually how it's seen online, a lot of these games, I'll let you for yourself consider what they look like. I just pulled this from a popular gambling website, and to me, a lot of these games look very much like video games. And where this becomes dangerous is that we factor in how young people are looking at these. 93% of young people play video games. And if they think they're good at these games, or they're playing these games and are really skilled at them, and then they see these games advertised on social media, or they see them advertised on websites, and they look just like the video games they're playing, then their perceived likelihood or how likely they are to win might change. They might think that if I was good at that, then surely I'm going to be good at this. But it's no longer a game of skill. Now it's a game of chance where the odds are against them. And these, you can see how visual, how exciting they look, and how appealing they might be to young people. And we know that lots of young people follow gambling sites or esports gambling sites on social media. When it comes to esports, 1 in 4 of those interacting with esports gambling tweets, specifically gambling tweets, are under the age of 16. And we know that 1 in 10 11 to 16-year-olds follow gambling firms on social media as well. And looking at these really shows how the direct marketing, they can receive that and see direct marketing from the industry. So unfortunately, we don't have time to cover all of the areas of concerns that there might be, but to touch on a couple of others, there are increasing in popularity, something called social casinos. And what they are is just an idea, a form of social media where people can go on and chat to each other and play casino games. There's no money, no real money involved. It's all just virtual currency, and you don't necessarily need to pay for the virtual currency. It's just an idea about trading these games. Now, that seems all right. I mean, to me, it's like, why would somebody play a gambling game but not for money? However, what this is at risk of doing is normalizing that behavior, normalizing these games. We perhaps don't know the odds of these games. Maybe the odds aren't the equivalent odds in the industry. They might be more likely to win when they're playing these social casino games. And so if they think they're winning lots in this game and then they go and play gamble for real when they've got the house edge against them, it can be dangerous. There's the gambling style games. So video games that feature gambling elements, but not necessarily loot boxes, just slot machines within the games or things that you need to spin a wheel to win something. And these are all gambling-like. However, they might not be handing over money, but you can see how that might be normalizing the gambling behavior. And the last one to touch on is something called skin gambling, which we know young people know about and some are doing. And what skin gambling is, the idea of skins is when I mentioned about a cosmetic microtransaction, something that doesn't necessarily improve what you've got, it's just an item that changes your appearance. That's what's known as skins. And in some games, you can export skins out of the game and then trade them for money or gamble them on third-party websites. And game companies this is frowned upon as a behavior, but they are very real. You can Google skin gambling and see some of the websites for yourself and how young people or anyone are gambling with the items they win in games for real money. There's a popular shooting game that has a rare knife involved. And that rare knife, people have traded out and has a value of up to £2,000. So as we did with looking at gambling, as we're a harm reduction charity, we've got some keeping safe tips as well. Agreeing on playing time and spending limits is really important for parents to be aware of, as well as young people. Factoring those in, making sure young people are taking regular breaks and tracking their spending. We just saw how easy it is to not realize what it is you're spending. So understand how much you might be spending on these. Understanding and using parental and security settings on consoles and devices. The information is out there. It can be really easy. A lot of different devices have different settings. So making sure that you're aware, or young people are aware, about how to use these effectively to protect young people from harm. Making sure, as we discussed with gambling, you're setting aside time for other activities or spending time with others in different activities as well. Reading, understanding and respecting the warning labels on games. The regulation body that does these warning signs is called PEGI in the UK, P-E-G-I. And at the moment, we know that the only thing that they can put on their little warning signs are they have in-game rewards. And if they've got those, then we know that they've got loot boxes involved. However, the age limits at the moment are 7+ or 12+. But I know, for example, when I was a child, I was never allowed to see an 18 or a 15 film. However, I didn't have the same strict rules when it came to video games. But we know how there's violence, and we know that there's gambling within elements within video games, so that makes it equally as important. And where possible, parents or adults should play the game with the child as well. And this is a really important message that I'd like to say in terms of it helps build that mutual relationship and that mutual respect. A lot of adults that I work with don't understand why young people are wanting to pay for V-Bucks and pay for microtransactions within their games. But it's that misunderstanding that kind of builds a barrier between that relationship. So when you play the game together, you can build an understanding. Also, you can see what it involves. You can see the loot boxes and see for yourself in terms of how these loot boxes open and how they might pose risks as well. As we're in lockdown at the moment, and we know that a lot of people are spending more time at home, especially children, there are some COVID implications to be concerned about as well, in terms of the isolation element, people being more isolated, less being able to go out and speak to people outside. Young people or your pupils might be more bored. They might not be engaging in much education and spending more time on their screens. They're experiencing less opportunity for competition, less extracurricular activities, less sports going on, and they can find the competition within gambling or games as well. Their parents might be more occupied now with working from home, so the parents to find a different way to occupy their kids, and using video games might be an effective way. And there's less schoolwork and activities, especially now and over summer. And looking at the keep safe tips that we just shared, whether it's gambling and gaming, it becomes really important so we don't have a lasting impact or a negative impact from COVID that we might see. So I discussed earlier about the Gambling Education Toolkit, and usually when I'm doing a webinar, I'll talk about at various points different activities we can do, but we do have a follow-up session webinar next Monday at the same time, and in that webinar I'll hope to discuss directly about how you as teachers, some of the activities that are great. We'll even give them a go as a more practical example, so it's not just me speaking. I'm sure you'll all be bored of hearing my voice after this hour. But the Gambling Education Toolkit is a free resource available online. It's got information, articles and links to the Curriculum of Excellence that you can pull right out. It's got specialist gambling support services, as well as education materials, session plan suggestions as well. And that's a website there that you can access, but it's all accessible from the Fast Forward website, which is fastforward.org.uk.
We've got quite a few questions just now. If you've got a little second to go over some of them, that's okay?
Yeah, Eva, go ahead.
Yeah, now I wonder, does your Gambling Education Toolkit, does that support parents as well? We have Jim McLean asking, he first of all asked, how are children accessing the funds to be able to purchase these loot boxes? And there's been a great bit of dialogue between himself and Andrew Gibson on the chat here about how that happens. So Jim's asking, is there anything out there to support parents if this is how they're accessing the funds themselves?
And that's a great question. And in terms of the support for parents, we at the Gambling Education Hub have an advice for parents leaflet that I'll share. Hopefully there's a way that I can share through you, Eva and Scott, to all the participants today that you can look at. It's just an easy top tips leaflet for parents to discuss with their children about how to use these. But there's also lots of websites that have more information, and I've got a support available slide that'll be coming up shortly that will look at some of the websites that are really effective to go on and learn about the financial elements within games, as well as other keep safe tips, and just to do a bit of further reading on that as well.
Great, thank you. And then a little while ago, Jackie here at Education Scotland, she had a really good question for us as well. Do you have, or are you aware of any interesting links between brain development and teenagers' need for risk?
We know that in terms of the research behind that, we know that young males are more likely to take risks than young females. And it's not to say that then risk isn't prevalent among young females, but what it means is that we know more young males gamble than young girls, as well as the video game playing as well. And through that we know that more males do it. But in terms of the brain development and the psychology behind it, I'm not aware of the exact psychology.
Great, thanks very much, Warren. That's us up to date with the questions for now, thank you.
That's great. As I say, a lot of the information and the support available in a couple of slides' time, that'll go into a lot of the stuff and some of the questions that people are asking. So hopefully people can do a bit of further reading as well. All right, Scott. Perfect. So that brings us on really nicely to this slide here. And Hopefully some of you can write down some of these as I go through them. But to discuss the support and advice available, first of all, on the left-hand side, we've got specific to gambling. And we've got the National Gambling Treatment Service, which is a network of organisations across Scotland, England and Wales that focus on the treatment of gambling disorder and problematic gambling behaviour. One of those is GamCare, and GamCare at the moment are the leading provider in treatment for of gambling disorder in the UK. And they fund projects all around the UK, some of which in Scotland, but they also fund the National Gambling Helpline, which is 24 hours, 7 days a week, as well as an online chat forum or chat line that you can access to. Our funders, Be Gamble Aware, are available. There's loads of information on their websites for practitioners, as well as more signs and symptoms to look out for gambling disorder, but ultimately looking at ways to reduce the harm that can come from gambling. The next two are more specific to Scotland. We've got Gamblers Anonymous Scotland, which have groups available all over Scotland and every local authority where people can discuss gambling behaviour. Gamanon Scotland is a service for the friends and family of gamblers. So if someone is affected by someone else's gambling behaviour, then they can receive emotional support and advice from Gamanon Scotland. It might be relevant for teachers in case any of your pupils are affected by their parents or other people's gambling behaviour. The bottom two are relevant for now in terms of people gambling more online because of COVID. So GamStop is a blanket self-exclusion scheme for online gambling. All gambling providers or online gambling providers in the UK need to register to GamStop, and it allows you to self-exclude, to not access these online gambling sites for a set amount of time, whether it's 6 months or 12 months. And then we've got Gamban, it works like a firewall that restricts access to gambling sites across all your devices, your phone, your tablet, or your laptop, that you can download and help restrict access and marketing as well. Then we've got the gaming support and advice. There's a website called askaboutgames.com that I recommend you checking out. It's got lots of information about PEGI, about why games are rated the way they are, and support for parents and further advice in terms of why and to protect young people from harm. We've got the NSPCC. I realise my acronym is not quite right there, but the NSPCC and Childline, which both have helplines for young people to access to if they're worried about their gaming behaviours, but also have information on their websites. Parent Zone is something I know somebody asked about, if there's information for parents, and Parent Zone have loads of reports and information about the links between gaming and gambling and how the converging industries might be posing risks to young people. A couple of others that aren't specifically around gaming, but they look at online safety and keeping safe online, and you may well be aware of them. Look at netaware.org.uk and internetmatters.org. And these websites, if you can take time to have a little to write them down, please do check them out. There's loads of information, and it's really credible information to support teachers, parents and young people with these different behaviours. So as teachers, what can you do? Making sure that we are discussing and educating young people about gaming and gambling. Often gambling is neglected, so actually thinking about risk-taking behaviours and where gambling can fit in. Access the toolkit, use the resources. It's completely free, and we've designed it just for you to do that. I've got there, book a free bespoke CPD for your colleagues. I work in schools and I'm more than welcome. I'd love to come and do a session directly with you and your colleagues, even if there's only a few of you. I can do it online, or when the restrictions are lifted, I can come to the school and work with some of the staff to build that into the curriculum. Or we have our interactive follow-up session next week. It'll be more interactive and hopefully looking at more about the practical ways you can include these games and practical examples of the games in what you do. There are limited spaces available, but I believe if there's 18 on today and all of you 18 could come along, it'd be brilliant. And that's me finished up. I've just about made it for time. I speak quite quickly, so I can fit a lot in an hour. But thanks very much, everybody. Eva, are there any other questions before we finish up?
Yes, there's one last question here from Mrs. Boyd. Can you let her know if Fast Forward is funded by the gambling industry? And then she says, in relation to alcohol and substance use, we have been advised in conjunction with the public health message that we cannot use resources that have been funded by the drinks industry.
And that's a really good question. And so Fast Forward is, we are against, as a charity, taking direct funding from industries. The Gamble Aware is an independent charity that receives funding from a small percentage of the profits from the industry. And then Gamble Aware, with that funding, they have these and they can build these projects. And what they did was they put funding applications out to Scotland, where Fast Forward, as an independent charity, applied for this funding. But we don't receive any direct funding, whether that's from the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, or from the gambling industry. None of the toolkit comes directly from the gambling industry.
Thanks, Warren. That's great. Really helpful.